Greetings, family. Back again for another episode on the Health Minute. Today I want to discuss obesity. I came across a chapter in the wonderful book by the messenger of God, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. This is actually book 1. There's another book, book 2. So there's actually 2. It goes a little bit more in depth in some of the topics in book 2. And you can get those at the website, www.noi.org, the bookstore. You can order those online. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tools to have in your arsenal. But in book 1, there's a chapter titled Overindulgence, the Enemy. And that led me to thinking of the number one problem that we have in America is obesity. America is actually the number one most obese nation in the world. That's definitely a serious health concern that we need to take an intense look into. It's said that 90% of all type 2 diabetes are actually sourced to obesity. I do want to define obesity though, so that we can, because there's obesity, obviously that's what we're discussing, then there's overweight. So I just want us to be clear in terms of the thinking and how we're looking at just going into the subject. Obesity is defined, and you can just Google it yourself. Obesity is defined as excessive amounts of fat stored in the body. Remember, previously we talked about how those fats are stored based on the food that we eat. So the toxins that the body can't get rid of or remove, it stores those within fat cells and then deposits those wherever around the body, all the organs, the brain, basically every area that you have an organ or body tissue cells, and you have that everywhere. So, but that's what obesity is, just the excessive amount of fat that's stored in the body. Overweight is to be considered, or to be above the considered or desired weight limit. So that's a little different, because they have, as most of you probably know, they have the BMI, the body mass index, which essentially just tells your height to weight ratio. So if you're 6'10", you should weigh such and such. If you're 5'10", you should weigh this. So that's what the BMI is. Now, you can imagine if you play sports, you're an athlete, or whatever you did in college and high school, you ran track. You're 5'10", 6'10", as an athlete is different than someone that's not involved in sports. So based on the BMI, the body mass index for your height to weight, then you can be considered overweight. Like LeBron James, for example, 6'8", 270 some odd pounds, right? According to the BMI, that would be overweight, because his height, you shouldn't weigh that much. But then when I was in college, what we had was, for the athletes, you obviously, you would have a little bit more muscular build than, those that didn't work out. The lacrosse team, we didn't have football, but basketball team, hockey team, and baseball. So they would work out. Obviously, you're more muscularly built than somebody who didn't do any of that, even if you are the same height. But what they would do at that point is not that you just discount the body mass index, but at that point you then measure the athlete's body fat. They had like this little machine that they used to, like a little instrument that it would just put to your body anywhere, and just check how much body fat that you had, how fast the skin reflexed. So it was different things that they did, that not that you discount the body mass index, but it helped to put it in perspective for athletes, because obviously you would have more of a muscular system and structure than somebody who didn't work out. So in terms of that, being obese and being overweight is two different things. And then obesity is actually a condition that can change not just the appearance, but it's actually tied to the disease process. So obesity is a condition, not just like overweight, like, oh, well, we're athletes, we're bigger than the norm. So that's understood. But obesity is actually tied to conditions of illness. And like they said, 90% of all type 2 diabetes is directly linked to obesity. And then in America, the number one obese nation in the world. And a lot of this is tied to things that we've kind of went over in the previous videos. Just the wrong food that we eat, too much food, and then even good food. And then you don't even factor in, just the toxins that's in we in America, we consume fast food, processed food, genetically modified food, altered food, food full of chemicals. So you would have to assume that all of this stuff takes effect on the body in terms of cleanliness and just the overall function. And that's the number one cause of becoming obese. It's not like it's a thing that just happens. It's a cause and effect thing. So the effect is obesity, but the cause is what? Well, the cause is based on what we do in terms of how we eat, how much we eat, where we eat, what's the quality of food that we eat. So, I would commend those who they approach the vegan lifestyle, or they just try to eat a lot of cleaner foods. And now there's a real big push for, just the labeling of food, whether they're genetically modified or not. There's a real big push in the organic community to expand that community. So all of those things are beneficial, just in terms of the overall health quality of the food, which is the health of the individual. And then that has to be put in its proper context as well, because even too much good food is not a good thing either. Because remember when we discussed the digestive process, even if you consumed a lot of good food, it still has to go through the process of being digested, being applied, and then sent throughout the body for application, for the sustenance of the human being, the individual. So if food goes past this point in terms of digestion and it sits too long, it still becomes a toxin in the body. So then that still can produce fat. And then it's the time that you eat. So obesity, it's a real serious condition, and it has a lot of supporting factors that go into the effects in terms of what the cause is. And once we can understand that the root of it is eating, as the messenger says, in How to Eat to Live, eating too much and too often. And that's the biggest, that I found, the biggest cause of obesity. I want to read to you some of the things that it's actually tied to in terms of the what it affects. They say obesity, it can cause infertility, hypertension, acne, asthma, cancer, heart disease, fatigue, arthritis, and degenerative or cause complete failure of the heart, arteries, and kidneys. There's another condition that they've actually been doing a lot of research to in terms of obesity is Alzheimer's, trying to determine what the exact link is from Alzheimer's and obesity. One of the things that was found was it's called atrophy. What that means is It's relating to the degeneration of cells. So remember, one of the issues with obesity was degeneration of, or complete failure of the heart arteries and kidneys. And so when you look at atrophy, and then understand that atrophy is linked to the degeneration of cells, and what it's tied to, though, is real important, because it's the degeneration of cells. But why? Well, and then the understanding is that it's the decline in the effectiveness or the vigor of the cellular function due to underuse or neglect. Then you say, well, how does that happen? Well, what happens with obesity is this restricts oxygen to cells and the body overall. So with the restriction of oxygen, not that it's under use or neglect as if we're consciously doing this, but it's because of the way that we eat. It's actually restricting the amount of oxygen that we need to get to our cells to sustain us. Obviously, we understand how important that is for brain function. So they're trying to figure out the link in Alzheimer's to obesity, and then this factor of atrophy in the oxygen that's restricted to the brain, causing these symptoms or these symptomatic problems that mimic Alzheimer's, or it actually is Alzheimer's. Then heart disease, then kidney failure, the failure of the arteries, the cellular walls. And a lot of this is linked to the fact that we're obese, for one, and then this causes the limitation of oxygen to cells. And that produces a whole nother issue of conditions as well as problems. One of the simplest solutions is, and it's probably seems like too good to be true, but one of the simplest solutions to obesity and a lot of these, what they call chronic conditions, is proper eating, obviously, proper thinking, and then exercise. Exercise, and I listed 7 points I wanted to just give you guys in terms of how exercise helps all of these conditions, and it's really straightforward. I'll read all 7 to you. Exercise helps, obviously, because it can control weight, obviously, because you're actively involved in the maintenance of your body weight. You're actively doing something to change, to alter, to reduce it. So obviously exercise, treadmill, even walking. Master Muhammad, as you can see how this book says from God in person, Master Muhammad, he said that walking is the best exercise. There's a whole lot of research that goes into walking, and it just proves that claim. But don't ever think that you have to do way too much. I have to go to the gym, I got to lift what you don't. Walking is the best exercise. Walking and eating proper foods. So don't even worry about it. It's not even that you have to do a whole bunch of things. Walking is beautiful. Number 2 I listed was just that it combats disease and health conditions. Obviously, like we said, the cause behind the obesity and the restriction of oxygen and things of that nature. So obviously exercise is the opposite of that. So that produces, this is actually one of the next, point 3. Exercise releases chemicals in the brain. You actually feel better. There's a chemical response to activity, exercise, that you actually feel better, and it's linked to your smile. So that's beautiful too. The 4th one is energy, and that's directly related to oxygen. The energy that you receive on a cellular level, that's directly related to the fact that you're more active, and then you have to take in more oxygen, and that just gives you more energy. And then, as we discussed earlier, the degeneration and the loss of vigor in the cells, exercising produces oxygen and the reinvigorating of the cells. And obviously you as well, as you get more, as I say, in shape. The 5th one is that it increases sleep, and it helps us sleep because it gets the body to a point of releasing specific chemicals. I don't really want to go into them scientifically, but you and I both know when you work out, you get tired, and it helps you go to sleep. You're more inclined to take rest because the body's actually calling for it at that time, and it wants to do what it needs to do to repair itself. That's optimal when you're asleep. So that's why it helps with sleep as well. And then, like I said, certain chemicals are released as well. It also helps in terms of, like, if you're struggling with sex life with your wife, your husband, obviously it does a lot for you physically, but what it does for your overall thinking and just the attractiveness that you have of yourself. And that can help if you're down on yourself. You think, well, I didn't look how I did when I was, 16, 17, in my 20s, 30s even maybe. So that helps with that. And the last point that I made was point 7, that exercise is just fun. You should try it, which is true. So exercise is definitely key. That's the solution to combat obesity. Another point that I didn't want to leave out, which is real critical. I just came across this looking up some information from the CDC, which said that the average newborn has 287 chemicals in the umbilical cord blood, 217 of which are neurotoxic, which means they're poisonous to nerve cells. And when you look at what it is and how it is that we eat, obviously obesity is at the forefront, but then these underlying conditions the things that we eat, for them to cause these underlying conditions, and then for that to be a direct reflection in our children and us unknowingly eating fast foods and whatever our favorite restaurants might be, and toxic foods, genetically modified foods, preservatives, additives that are unnatural. This is damaging to our children. This causes us to put them in a condition that they suffer from ailments and degenerative diseases and what they call hereditary diseases that they do not have to. In 1944, there was and I want to see if I can find this for you now, but there was a study done to determine what was the cause of the influx or the elevation of obesity, high blood pressure, and metabolic syndrome in Holland. Now, what they found was, this affects things like, as the CDC just said, with that being present in the umbilical cord blood, and so it has prenatal implications of you not eating properly. And in 1944, there was what they call the Dutch hunger winter. Not the Nazi Germany had occupied Holland, and there was a restriction of food and nutrition that was given to its occupants. So what this produced, or they found that in the second and third trimester, the women who were in the second and third trimester, that this then produced the body, or the children within the womb, or the fetus, it learned to adjust to the environment. This later on caused specific defects in terms of the body's processes, some of what we discussed in the digestion. And then a half century later, there's an influx, there's an increase in the amount of high blood pressure, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. Remember, digestion is directly tied to metabolism, meaning the body's overall ability to process, digest, in terms of apply and make use of food that you take in. Break it down, use it, remove it, keep itself functioning optimally. So the reason why I say that is to say, with America being the #1 most obese country in the world, we need to take a serious look into this in terms of what it is that we put in our bodies, because we can give our children a direct death sentence. If not a death sentence, a difficult life in terms of disease and illness and what they call hereditary things, which I'm not really into that because it just doesn't really make sense. I'll get into that at another time. But a lot of these things are the conditions that we cause on ourselves from, outside environments that we're unaware of. Sometimes we just like certain things, certain foods they make to taste extremely good, and it tastes good, so you want to keep doing it. And they do make these things addictive. But with these conditions and just getting a better understanding of it, I think that we can take a better approach in terms of trying to stop this, as the messenger says, this early rush to the grave. And I think that if we just take the time to look into some of these things, that we can do ourselves and our children a lot better by changing the way that we eat, changing the way that we think, and then changing the way it is that we take on this process of nutrition. I think it'll be really beneficial. And exercise, like I said, you don't have to go too far. Like, oh my God, I have to get a membership. No, you really don't. You can just walk, and that's beautiful. And we'll try to get into some of the benefits of walking while fasting as well. But definitely, thank you for listening, family. Assalamu alaikum. Best wishes to you on nutrition.